welcome to episode 158 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, I do my first electric vehicle supercharging. Now, if I could only just get through a day without 2 naps and not nodding off, waiting for my toast to pop.
I love a 2-nap day. The value of combustion cars has plummeted in China. This is expected to affect countries all over the world, but mostly Jay Leno.
Has Elon Musk become aware of his descent into madness? The dog picture at the top of Twitter says no. I mean, it doesn't even have wings, Brian. What's up with that thing?
How long does it actually take to build a nuclear power station? The answer? Longer than this podcast episode, but shorter than the new John Wick movie.
All that and more on this week's edition of The Clean Energy Show.
Yes, and we're a day late recording this week because I had a weekend in Winnipeg, a city not too far away from us, about a 6-hour drive. No particular reason, just a nice little weekend visit, although they do have a new botanical gardens called The Leaf, which we went to. They started building it before COVID. It's taken them several years. And yeah, it's quite spectacular. A lot of fun there in Winnipeg at the Leaf Botanical Gardens.
Last week, you talked so much about your trip to Fargo that I put the YouTube video on Travel and Leisure to see how it would do there.
Yeah, not as much maybe to talk about this week, but there were more blizzards, of course. Like, this is now April, and sure, it's Canada on the prairies, and we have lousy, terrible weather often. But blizzards in April, that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. It's and we just missed it coming. We actually left a little bit early coming back from Winnipeg to miss the blizzard that was expected to hit. And then while we were in Winnipeg, I guess you guys got a whole bunch of snow here. It's crazy. There's still tons left. It hasn't melted yet.
No, we did have snow, but you know what? Who cares? It is. I'm looking at the end of the forecast period. It's very positive. Mass melt underway.
I guess, yeah. I mean, my solar panels were starting to clear and I was starting to get some power, and now I come back from Winnipeg and they're all covered again.
Do you know what happened to mine? Mine got like the little transceiver that sends the signal from the end of a Ethernet cable. It died after 5 years. Anyway,
my other story from Winnipeg, which is not particularly exciting, but we stopped at IKEA and they have free chargers at IKEA. But I had to put the ChargePoint app on my phone in order to get the free charging. I was surprised. Yeah, I assumed it would just be a plug and play kind of thing. But no, I had to install the ChargePoint app. And I know you're going to talk about charging your car soon. So this is my first experience. Like, as a Tesla owner, you just drive up to the Tesla charger and you plug in. You don't have to worry about it. So this is my first time having to install an app for charging. And, it took about 5 minutes just to put in the credit card and all that stuff. And, ended up with an hour of free, level 2 charging at the end of it. But, just interesting to actually do that for the first time.
Yeah. Well, level 2 charging can get you 20 kilometers. It can get you 80 kilometers. Who knows what was it, a Tesla connector on there for your Model 3?
No, I had to use the adapter thing. It was
There's
just
no
like
Tesla privileges there, eh?
1772.
Would you stop by the cafeteria? Anything you want to admit to?
I ate meatballs.
Meatballs. That is so inventive of you. You just, like everyone else, eat the meatballs. Yeah. We have 3 months of the app, the remote connectivity, and I've been using, you use it on your phone to start it from anywhere and check the charge level. It's the only place on the Bolt that gives you the percentage of the battery. There's no way to see the percentage. There's just the mileage that's left, the range that's left. So this is how it works. I recorded it earlier. Alexa, ask Chevrolet to start my car.
Okay. Start your vehicle. What's your PIN?
329-187-65 pi 421-1016-78.
Got it. Starting your Chevrolet Bolt EV.
Now, I added some numbers there because I'm not going to give away my 4-digit PIN. That's how it works. And yeah, sometimes I'm too lazy to pick up my phone. But is it worth $15 a month? No, Brian Stockton, it's probably not. I don't think. Unless
Did you say 50 or 15?
15.
15.
Yeah.
Canadian dollars.
Canadian dollars. So My wife had relatives in due to hospitalization of her sister. Her sister was near death and almost written off, and now she's at home doing fine.
Wow.
And they still don't know what happened to her. But some of her relatives came in from Calgary, which is an 8-hour trip or something like that. And we decided that they'd go to the spa in Moose Jaw because that's the next town over, about an hour's drive. And so I dropped off my wife and daughter and came back home. But it was our first highway trip with any EV. Like we have the Leaf, which we wouldn't dare take on the highway for that far, ever. It was interesting. I was a bit nervous. I was a bit checky, but you got to get the first one out of the way. And it went fine. It was a bit chilly. It was -8 Celsius or 18 Fahrenheit with a rear cross wind. But I got there with using a little bit more than a quarter tank of electrons, I would say, which is fine. Yeah, and I was going at 110 kilometers an hour because I just wanted to go the speed limit, which is what that is, and see what it was like. And on the way back, I did some testing into a bit of a wind, and, that one used up a lot more. It's amazing how much, on the Bolt, you can see how many kilowatts it's using at any given time. So if you turn off the heater, you can say, well, okay, 4 kilowatts or less are being used now. But if you set the cruise control at a certain speed, so at night, at 100 kilometers an hour, it was 19 kilowatts being used at any given moment. That's about 60 miles an hour. And 110, which is 68 miles an hour, it was all the way up to 24 kilowatts. But at 120, it really went up. Now, some of this has to do with physics because the coefficient, the drag, on the car expands exponentially. It doesn't go up in a linear way. So 120 kilometers an hour, 10 kilometers above the speed limit, that's 75 miles an hour, was 32 kilowatts. Now that's compared to just 19. So that's really, really significant. It's more than 50% more just for 20 kilometers an hour. Now that was with the wind, so it'll be less. So we did our first DC fast charge at the Co-op gas station in Moose Jaw, which used Co-op branded chargers. So I wasn't sure what to use there because I understand they're using Shell now, but I just stuck my credit card in, which was a mistake. I'll explain why in a minute. And we charged for 25 minutes. We weren't going to charge for 25 minutes, Brian, but the time went by so fast and we were having a great time and it was so exciting to us. And so we had nowhere to be. And we just really enjoyed ourselves, which is something I know that you have experience with because I know this is my first time.
Yeah, it always goes by pretty quick. Of course, longer in the winter, takes longer to charge in the winter, but the charging stops in the summer, they're always over before you are ready.
I should point out that I'm sick this week. I'm getting sicker, and I may or may not make it through the episode.
Yeah, I got a bit of a cold myself.
Well, I've got a bit of a flu, and my family's had it, and they've been I don't like to, I know what's coming and I don't like it because it's not good. So I'm a bit raspy this week and a bit weak. So please cut me some slack, people. We're here doing the show because we're dedicated. Yeah. So first, I got charged $9 for 25 minutes, which is fine. That's what I expected. It's roughly known to be $20 an hour at those things, the flow chargers and the, however, I wasn't charging very fast because I was fairly full and it was cold out, so I wasn't getting too much. But I mean, if I needed it, it wouldn't have been that inconvenient to add some peace of mind to a trip where I was, had range anxiety or wasn't entirely sure. Yeah. And Brian, there's a cool thing about the Bolt. It's got an interesting, cool display around the speedometer, digital speedometer. It's got a green circle around it that turns orange. So it will show you what your range is, right? And if you go into orange, it's going to be less than that range. So if you just slow down enough till the circle turns green, you will make that range. So that's very interesting. And it's kind of an easy way to deal with that sort of situation if the wind picks up or if you turn into a wind.
An easy indicator of, you're using a bit too much juice.
And then I got a false billing on my credit card the next day. And it said it was somebody in the United States used your credit card at a Green Lot, which is an electric charging station company, for $27. And I spent $9, but my $9 charge wasn't there. Anyway, by the time I found the email, because I've been driving back and forth, to the city is it was gone and it was taken care of. I think it was a green lot mistake, not a credit card stolen mistake.
Oh, I see. So whoever does the billing for the thing that
Yeah.
you used. Yeah.
Screwed up. Yeah. My credit card is not supposed to work in the States, which pisses me off because I tell it not to until I go on a trip to only work in certain jurisdictions. Because
I didn't know that.
We've had things happen to us every time we go on a trip.
Oh, yeah.
Every time. We went to Winnipeg, like you. Measly Winnipeg. Unexciting Winnipeg. I used a parking meter there, a public parking meter, and, somebody was buying pizza with it somehow.
Why?
I don't know how. So then it's Toronto, Hotel Toronto. Anyway, Brian, you are a man of the people. You talk to regular folks all the time. I do not. I'm a shut-in. And I haven't been getting out much due to health reasons. And it's really weird when you talk to regular people about EVs because you really don't know a damn thing. Like the people who come up to you in parking lots, like you mentioned those before.
Yeah. Everybody's still really in the dark generally. My
brother and sister-in-law have a Prius from 2006 and a pickup truck. And they, like I said, it's 700 kilometers roughly from Calgary or something like that. And they decided to take the pickup truck, not the Prius. So the Prius would have saved them it would have been $125 instead of $300 because, I figured it out.
Roughly half. That would be my guess, yeah.
But then when they went to pick the hotel room, they skimped $8 to get a Super 8 instead of all the other hotel rooms. Like every other hotel room in town was $8 more. You could have had your pick of anything, But no, they wanted to save the $8. So it's just funny how people think and don't think about these things. They don't think about, I asked them, did you ever calculate how much money you've saved after all those years of having that Prius? They bought it used, but they've had it since about, 10 years. And no. Never occurred to them. My sister-in-law says she jackrabbits it, so she's not a sensitive driver.
Yeah.
It's not going to be fuel efficient in an EV. It's not going to be fuel efficient in a gas car when you drive like that.
Well, there's a new podcast, Morgan Housel, the guy who wrote the book, what was that book? Oh, The Psychology of Money. That's what it is. He's got a new podcast, and the first episode is called The Art of Spending Money. And he talks about stuff like that everybody has their own, so much of money is tied up in everyone's individual psychology. And, he uses the example of a company will often spend way more time on a $200 discussion than they would on a $10 million discussion. Like everybody's got an opinion on what the snacks should be in the break room, and they'll talk about it for hours, but then, just approve a $10 million project with, the same or less amount of discussion. So everybody has their own sort of weird, psychological things to do with money. It's
weird. And I bought a video doorbell for $80, a U-fee video doorbell that was usually $200. It was refurbished, came perfectly new. I had one before that used a black and white CRT little monitor inside of it, and it was outdated when I bought it in 2009. It was like
like a prop from an old James Bond movie.
But it's all I wanted to spend the money on. But it's still, because we have our Paso Solar house has really small windows on the north side where the street is, so we don't have a good view of anything. So it was always very handy to see, is the garbage getting taken and things like that, or, who's at the door. And so I bought them. I've been trying to for years buy a modern doorbell, and I'm really impressed with it. It's mostly not a doorbell. It's mostly a security camera.
Right.
And it's not the good ones the good ones of the same company can detect a person crying. And if a little kid is crying at your door, maybe you'll give them more attention than if they weren't, and it'll tell you that. So AI has gotten crazy. It doesn't do that, but it does detect people perfectly well, and it only detects people. And so, so I get notifications when people are there. I've even checked it to say, what time did I leave this morning? Because I wanted to know what time something happened. I can check my records now. And it's stupid things like that. But it's got a great night vision. And and I'm warned when the wife comes home. I've got a few minutes warning to put away the chocolate cookies that I found.
Sure, yeah.
All kinds of useful things like that.
Yeah.
I do have news. I have news about GM coming to talk to the electrician. I can't remember where he was from, but he's really again, it's just one of those things where he was like us. He wasn't, he knew everything. He knew all about EVs. He knew all about the requirements of it. And what he did was he contacted my partner, and then she contacted me, and I'm driving home from said gym, and he says, well, can we do a video conference? We've got the special software. So I text you the link. So he texts me the link, and I log into the software, and then my camera turns on, and then, so I'm outside the house. When I get home, I start showing him, explaining where everything is and what everything needs to be. Then I walk into the house to the utility room and looking at everything. And he wanted to know the markings on this wire that was really hard to get to, the EV charger wire. Because I had asked the solar company to install a future-proof EV charging wire, because my charger for my Leaf was only 3.3 kilowatts. But I wanted, I thought, well, in case we have two cars, which we're planning on it, which was 5 years ago now, it took until now to happen, or if we just want faster charging for the modern cars, then I want to future-proof if we can. So he did. Yeah. I wasn't sure, but he did put in a thicker wire, and it took me a long time. I had to really squeeze and get down there and put the camera in, but the camera picked it up. Where I couldn't see, this little video application he had going picked it up and said, yep, that's good. It's we can do this. And so we're just going to upgrade my current charging thing because there's no more room on my panel for more electricity. I've maxed out my load, but we can do that and be happy. So that's what's going to happen in maybe a week or so. So they're going to come by.
Yeah, well, with the newer iPhone cameras, if you take a picture of something that's text, you're allowed to highlight the text and copy and paste it, which is, wild.
I was struggling. I'd given up several times, Brian, on trying to get this, to see if there was any markings. I said, there's no markings. He says, there gotta be. So I'm twisting around this high voltage wire, and I didn't want to twist it too much, but the sheathing on it sort of turned around the conduit, and we found out what it was. So that's cool. And, I said, what he would have to do if we didn't do that is put in a load sharing device for $1,500 plus labor.
Yeah.
So that I didn't overdo the panel so that it would be shared, and I don't know much about those. He's also said they're on back order and would take a while, like a month or two. But then I came up with the idea that I could buy a dual home charger, EV charger, that would do its own load sharing. Yeah. Because those things are pretty expensive now, but maybe in the future they'll come down. And they do their own calculations if there's two cars plugged in, or maybe with your app, you can prioritize which car to charge, and that'll do the trick for me.
Yeah, this is an issue for a lot of people as we start to electrify, because a lot of people's electrical panels are getting full. So there are different things you can do to kind of share two cars on one plug.
Brian, we have a letter here. Would you mind reading it?
Yeah, this is a letter from Mitchell. Hey, Brian and James. I want to start off by saying that I listen to hours of podcasts every day as I make supper, clean up, make lunches for my kids, etc. And your podcast is the one I look forward to the most every single week.
Thank you, Mitchell.
What a nice thing to say. Yeah, that's great. And you're in good company in terms of climate and news podcasts I listen to, such as Outrage and Optimism, Zero, and CBC's What on Earth.
He lists 9 podcasts, Brian. I think that's too many.
Yeah,
on one subject matter. I think
we shortened the list here, but he listens to a lot of shows.
You have to dip out of the climate sometimes, man. Breathe some fresh air and not be panicky about everything. I don't know if that's healthy.
Yeah, too much news. Yeah, I don't know. You got to be careful about that. So a few comments. James, congrats on your Bolt purchase. I've had the Ioniq 5 for a year now, and I love it. What I do not love is what I found out recently, and which is explained in the Ioniq Guy video below. Basically, when using a level 1 charger, there are 40% losses. I charge solely using a level 1 charger because that is all I need, and it would have cost me around $1,300 just to wire an outlet to my garage. You were talking about level 1 versus level 2 recently. I'd be curious to know if you have any info on the topic of charging losses. You were talking about insurance. With my perfect driving record, my EV insurance went up 40% this year.
Not fair.
Who knows why that is? And different insurance is calculated differently, I know. Finally, you mentioned carbon credits. I try not to fly, but I was pressured to take my kids on holiday and I was going to buy carbon credits, but I still haven't because I do not know which company to trust. Mitchell joined the club. I still haven't figured that out myself. And so, yeah, he's wondering if we could provide any more insight on that topic. So, I guess we're going to have to do more research on those carbon credits. I am hoping to buy some soon.
I started looking into it for Mitchell and the gold standard, but it's a weedy thing. It's a deep dive you have to go into. There's lots of stuff to look into, and it'll take me a long time. Now, charging losses. I think the charging loss of 40% on a 110 or 120 volt regular outlet, that has to do with the car getting heated. I think. The battery's getting heated a little bit, and the rest is going to charging. There's no 40% charging loss due to the electronics. It's less than that. It is worse in a 110 than it is the 240. Generally speaking, your EV may use 12 to 50% more energy than what you add to your battery. And that number could be lower or higher depending on charging conditions. So what's happening, Brian, is that the electricity from your house is AC, alternating current. And your battery, like any battery, is usually DC current. So it has to convert that with your inverter in your car, and that gets hot. So you're losing energy due to heat loss. And there's a loss involved in that charging. But it's not 40%. It's 12 to 15%. And anything above that is actually heating the battery. So my car heats the battery as well, but you're not really losing it. It's just making your battery more operational for the charging and charges faster and gives you longer range. So there are a number of reasons. Like I said, converting from AC to DC. DC fast charging, interestingly, only has about a 1% loss. That's when you're at a public charging station. And that's why they call it DC. There's no AC to DC conversion. It's straight to your battery. So usually there's two prongs on those fast chargers that deliver the plus and minus electricity.
So when you're charging at home, you're charging with AC, but in a public charger, a fast charger, you're charging with DC, and the car knows how to handle both.
Yeah, more energy is converted to heat to keep the battery at the right temperature. Model Y, here's an example. They use 13% more. That's one of the worst ones, and others are around 5%. But yeah, like I said, largely due to cold weather, if you're seeing more than 12 or 15% at the worst. And like I say, if you charge on the highway, it's not a factor.
Yeah, and level 1, for some reason, is less efficient than using level 2.
Do you have anything to say about insurance?
I guess shop around. Yeah, it's, insurance is one of those things that's different in every jurisdiction. There's different rules and different players. And so, yeah, I think it's just one of those things you've got to research locally. I mean, it could just be that the insurance is going up for that car because the repair costs are particularly high. Like if somebody gets into an accident and it has to be repaired.
It's new.
It's
more expensive.
So once more data comes in, they often just raise the rates because they realize, these bumpers for this car cost a fortune, so we got to jack up your rates. So hopefully there's nothing malicious about it being an EV, but we do know EVs can maybe sometimes be more expensive to fix, so that might have something to do with it. But, these things are all new, so they're figuring out perhaps what the proper rates are. But maybe in the meantime, you can shop around and get a better deal.
Mitchell, we'll explore carbon offsets as best we can in a future episode sometime, as soon as we can, find the right resource. But so far, it seems like goldstandard.com is one of the more reputable places, but I can't guarantee that. So we'll just try it. Brian, what's your first story this week?
Yeah, so in China, combustion car values apparently are plummeting. So this story is from Electrek, and the headline is ICE car values plummet in China, and it is the canary in the coal mine. And so we've talked about this before. There will eventually sometime be a point in the future when nobody's going to want to buy a combustion vehicle because we're just going to switch to electric, and Once you switch to electric, you don't want to go back. It's kind of the better way to be. But this appears to be happening first in China. So the new Chinese emission rules were announced all the way back in 2016, and they're now set to go into effect in July. So this gave automakers 7 full years of notice to get it together and prepare to produce and sell less polluting vehicles, which, seems more than enough time to bring a new model to production. So they thought 7 years was plenty of time. And of course, Chinese automakers have made decent progress with electric vehicles. COVID kind of slowed things down because the whole car market kind of slowed things down. So it says here from electric dealership, foot traffic is high, but customers simply aren't buying. This has left dealers with a huge glut of polluting vehicles and a ticking clock that will make them unsellable in July. So it's not an outright ban, but it's just on certain pollutants. So yeah, this is it's coming home to roost, as they say.
I think we've got a story in the lightning round that I think something like 33% of new cars in China now have a plug. So that's really deep into the S curve. So yeah, not good things are going to happen after you get to that point as far as gas goes, especially with gas going up. OPEC cut production, right, this week. OPEC plus Russia, OPEC plus.
Okay.
The plus is Russia.
I didn't realize that.
Great bunch of people they are. They're trying to make the most money they can while they can. And they also think that everything's going to be fine. It won't be. I don't think it will be at all. But anyway, that's that. China, once again, on and off, they've been a leader in EV adoption, right?
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they'll change course slightly if this is destroying their auto market or something. But for the time being, they were given 7 years to clean up their act, and so this is causing the price of gas cars to plummet.
And when the government in China says 7 years, you usually listen to them, right?
Yeah.
Brian from Electric, Ram has released the details of its first electric truck, the Ram, at New York Auto Show on Wednesday, showing impressive specs, I think. The seems to be outspecking the competition. The new 2025 Ram 1500 REV will be offered in 2 battery options. The standard 168 kilowatt hour battery pack has a targeted range up to 350 miles or 560 kilometers. But the longer range battery has 500 miles or 800 kilometers. And that is a good range for a truck if you're going to tow anything.
Well, but won't that make the truck insanely heavy with a giant battery pack like that?
That is big, isn't it? Does the Semi, is that encroaching on what the Semi has to offer? The Tesla Semi? It's a big battery pack.
But that's a really big battery pack.
And a low center of gravity, too, I would imagine, with that sort of weight.
You could make 5 or 6 smaller cars with that battery.
Well, they'll be offering towing capacities of up to 14,000 pounds and a payload of 2,700 pounds with, and this is good to see, 800-volt fast charging, which is something, in any new product nowadays you want to see, like the Hyundais and the Kias have, and the Porsche.
Okay, so I want to talk about a story here from Hannah Ritchie. This is a Substack that I follow. Hannah Ritchie works for Our World in Data, a website that just tracks various kinds of data. And I'm a huge fan. This is my favorite Substack. She's written an article about how long does it take to build a nuclear reactor. And I thought we should talk about this because we have often complained on this show about how ridiculously long it takes to build a nuclear reactor. So there's sort of good news and bad news. The good news is it's not as long as we've made it out to be on the show.
No, it shouldn't be that long. It's gone way over what they expected.
Those are outliers. The average time to build a nuclear reactor is 6 to 8 years. Now, the bad news is that's really still too long in a climate emergency, I would say.
Definitely, because you have to get approval from, this is the building process. You can't say, let's build a nuclear reactor next door. That doesn't happen quickly. That's years in the process. Yeah. So in the best case scenario, and I'm not very optimistic about that because I don't think we've got enough trained people to meet those, it doesn't. I would bet heartily against it.
Yeah, well, this is one of the things that's delved into in the article here. It says some can be built in under 5 years, which, you wouldn't think listening to our podcast that was possible, but that is possible. So I wanted to make sure that we said it. But basically, it's, we've lost expertise. We've mentioned this before on the show. In certain countries, especially, once you stop building them, you lose the expertise. And then when you try and ramp up again, it's going to take you a ridiculously extra long time. So if it's a country that's continually building them, then they can do it much more quickly. So like some of the faster countries here, Japan has been one of the fastest to build nuclear, but of course they're probably getting shy about it with the Fukushima disaster. But Japan, South Korea, and China are faster than the Europeans and the Americans, but most countries can build quickly when they want to, but all countries are at risk of significant delays. So there's been some of these extra long projects in many places. If you build one fast, it's not a guarantee that you're going to build more. But what she figured out was that in the past, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, if a particular country was in dire need of electricity, that's when they were able to build them fast enough. Like, when they had a deadline of, okay, well, we need this many megawatts on the grid by a certain amount of time, they were able to get it done. But the final point is that the small modular reactors seem to be much faster to build, and the very large ones take a lot longer. So, of course, this is how the industry seems to be pivoting. Small modular reactors are the kind of the buzzword of the day in that industry. So the good news is that those are faster to build if that's what the industry decides to go for.
How do we know, Brian? It's just faster to build on paper because really only one has been built.
James, you look at the data. The data is there. Okay. Hannah Ritchie looked at the data, and this is what she found.
Sometimes you got to look at the data.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. The demand for small modular is not as great as the full-fledged. That's what people want. That's what governments are looking for right now, is what I'd heard from actual people who lobby in the nuclear industry. So it's interesting that people are pushing these, but really they want massive amounts of clean electricity all at once if they could.
Yeah, the larger stations, are probably preferable. I mean, if you're going to go nuclear and go big. But it's harder to do them large. We've often talked about different countries and how they're working on electrification, and it's often subsidies. But Uganda has gone full bore, and they're just going to give out free motorcycles. So this is a story from Electrek. A lot of stories from Electrek this week. So it's a company called Spiro. It was formerly known as Mauto, and they've already put 4,500 electric motorcycles on the road in Rwanda, Benin, and Togo. And now they're planning to scale up operations and roll out 140,000 electric motorcycles in Uganda over the next 5 years. So they've done this with $50 million in funding from the African Fund for Transformation and Industrialization. And they're going to provide not just 140,000 locally built motorcycles, but 3,000 battery swap stations. So the idea being that with this initial subsidy, they can hand out free motorcycles, build all this infrastructure, and then eventually make money on the charging. Like it's going to cost money to swap your batteries. And this is similar to the Gogoro battery swap thing that we've seen on scooters. This apparently is not quite as simple. It takes a little bit longer. It takes like 3 minutes to switch out the battery. But this is the plan for Uganda. These motorcycles have a range of about 90 kilometers or 56 miles. And then you swap out the batteries. So, the plan is to use a lot of these for taxis. There's a lot of motorcycle taxis in Uganda. And this leads to, bad air quality. Because of all those, kind of simple two-stroke gasoline motors belching out a lot of smoke. So, this is going to take a while to actually implement, but 140,000 free motorcycles in Uganda over, they say, the next 5 years.
Now, this is something we touched on a little bit a few weeks ago. And I remember one of the issues was that there's a lot of Uber taxis or Uber motorcycles, believe it or not. And that is hard to believe. But yes, if you call for an Uber, a guy on a motorcycle without a helmet will show up and you get on the back. And that's a large way that people get around nowadays because everybody has smartphones. So even in developing economies, everybody has a smartphone these days that enables something like this that we wouldn't necessarily have here to work fine. Let's get on to the lightning round. Coming up in a second, we have the tweet of the week. This is old news to some people, but some of our new listeners might be interested. Norway has been taxing their oil and gas industry at 78% since the mid-1990s and built a public fund worth $1.9 trillion. That is $350,000 for every adult and child in Norway. $350,000, Brian. And what do we have here? We have like that much in debt. To the oil industry.
Just burn the oil and that's it.
Listen, the oil industry is getting subsidized when things are going well. What are they going to be like when things aren't going well? When electrified transportation takes over, holy crap, we're in trouble. Meanwhile, Australian taxpayers subsidize coal, oil and gas, $111 billion per year. That's a lot of money to subsidize something that doesn't need any money because they're making billions. I don't get it.
There's still way too many oil and gas subsidies all around the world, not just Australia.
Well, let's get to the lightning round. And it's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Paris votes to ban controversial e-scooter rentals in the city. The population is turned against e-scooters, Brian. They don't want them.
Yeah, so you're still going to be allowed to have them as a private owner of an e-scooter, but this is the sort of rental ones that, like the Lime scooters was one brand where they're just left all over the city, and you can just, when you come across one with your smartphone, you scan the tag and you can start driving it. So yeah, I've always liked the idea of them, but I always wondered, okay, well, is this really what we want, to have a bunch of scooters just sort of parked everywhere all over the city? And Paris apparently said, no, we don't want that.
GM sells over 20,000 EVs for the first time in Q1 with the Chevrolet Bolt. I was one of those. Cadillac Lyric sales heating up quite significantly. Ford has now slipped below GM for number 2 position in U.S. EV sales for the first quarter of 2023. So, as we've said on the show before, it's been going well. Elon Musk has officially been dethroned from the top of Forbes' annual world billionaires list. And soon he'll be homeless. The Tesla and Twitter chief is now second richest billionaire. Who's the richest? Some guy with a company. French luxury goods. What's that? I mean, what's French luxury goods?
Yeah,
it's not chocolates. It's just luxury goods. Maybe are they boats? Why does that make him the richest person? I don't. Here it is. It's the CES Fast Fact. By the 2050s, the volume of solar panel waste will rise up to at least 5 million metric tons a year. That's 5 million metric tons a year. But, good news, researchers at Deakin University in Melbourne say they have successfully tested a new process that safely and effectively extracts silicon from old solar panels without the use of toxic chemicals. Then, that regular-sized purified silicon is reduced in size to nanoscale particles using a special ball milling process. And that sounds painful. That nano-sized silicon has a market value of $45,000 per kilogram, far more than regular silicon, which has a market value of $650 per kilogram. So that's encouraging. We're not at a point where it's a big deal yet, but it will be one day.
Yeah, eventually there's going to be way too many solar panels that need to be retired. So this is something we're going to have to work on in the future.
Oh, it's a new segment, the sad news of the week. New research published in the journal Nature on March 29th finds that as Antarctica warms, meltwater from its glaciers could slow those massive ocean currents by 40% as soon as 2050. With technology, you and I could be alive at 2050, theoretically.
Let's hope.
Let's hope, some special... well, at least if my head's in a jar, I'd be fine. I don't need the rest of me anymore. It's the head that counts. So the result will be substantial changes to the Earth's climate in ways that are not fully understood, but likely involve an acceleration of droughts, flooding, and rising sea levels. The research suggests that such a slowdown in the ocean current could alter the climate in the world for centuries. And every once in a while, we have to have bad news. VW and Redwood want to recycle your old laptop and cell phone batteries. Volkswagen, the car company, Redwood, the EV battery recycler, they're going to be collecting your batteries, your lithium batteries, at the Volkswagen dealerships and turning them into new cars. Interesting. Especially because those things are always hard to get rid of. Now I know where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, China's plug-in car sales reached 33% market share in February of this year. Here's another CES fast fact. Almost the entire global population, 99% of the population on this planet, breathes air that exceeds the World Health Organization's air quality limits and threatens their health. Not cool. Billionaire Tom Steyer's investment firm, Galvanized Climate Solutions, this is our last story this week, will begin buying and upgrading apartment properties across the United States this summer and fall, aiming to cut the portfolio's greenhouse gas emissions to net zero in 3 years without the use of offsets. Interesting. So they're buying apartment buildings. This is what they do. But now they're converting them to net zero apartment buildings, which will be great for the tenants who will have to pay less in utility fees to keep them warm and all that. So that's wonderful.
Presumably they've done the math and, this is not a charity. This is a business. So they have figured out that this is a good business strategy to go green and clean.
As you say, they looked at the data. And that is our time for this week. That's our show. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Every other way to contact us, and there are many, are in our show notes with your podcast player, including ways you can leave us a online voicemail. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, and we've got t-shirts there, links if you want that. We've got merchandise, we've got mugs. The store is also in your show notes. So if you're new, remember to subscribe to the podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week, should I continue to be alive next week, Brian.
I hope so.
We'll see you next time.
See you next week.